What's going on, everyone? This is Sherry, and you are tuned into She Said What She Said, the podcast where we interview badass women in the sports world and beyond. And we have a fun one tonight, very timely, because she does stuff on TV. And I just watched it. Actually, the other night, I had a DVR when I was like, oh, we're going to do it. So I made sure I watched it the night before. But before we bring in our fantastic guest, I have a co-host. And you guys have seen her many times before. She's one of our more frequent flyers on here. One of my besties, Miss Emma V.
Hi, I'm back. Woo!
You're back. I just can't get rid of you if I tried.
Absolutely not. Absolutely.
How many years have we been friends? I was trying to think about this the other day.
We met, what was it, January 2015?
This seems legit. Okay,
That's all right.
So yeah, I'll accept it.
And a random road trip.
I know, road trip. And how is your knee doing?
It's good. I'm all cleared, no surgery, no physical therapy. They drained
Really?
Yeah, he drained it a little bit, said let's see how you go, and it has improved. So we're gonna go with it. I'm back to full leg days, plyometrics without an issue. Shocking, I know.
Damn. So just your body just needed. Okay, T. I see how it is. Y'all both so old, probably friends for a while. Okay, I see where this is going tonight.
Right, everybody's tuned in.
Right, and he's in the other room on the couch, like
That's literally. I could open this door right now.
Right. Door, stop it. Oh, well, I'm glad that your knee is all healed up, ready to go. I guess your just bodies need a little rest.
Yeah, I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah,
maybe I am old, and it's the arthritis kicking my ass, so it's fine.
It's fine. But we have a very fun guest. She is also related to you, which is kind of cool. A cousin. And so your cousin, Amanda Winkler, she is a lead post-production editor at ESPN. So fancy title. She's probably going to look at like what I have all set up on here and be like, it's not a good look. You should change it all. But that's okay. I'll accept constructive feedback afterwards. And so very exciting too, because one of the pictures she sent was a picture of her holding an Emmy. And so I looked it up, and she was part of a Sports Emmy this year for the Kobe Bryant special. And then she had this month's Truth Be Told, ESPN's, was it 60?
That's the next Emmy. I could feel it. The next Emmy coming in.
That one was so good. And it was like the trailer had been out. Like I had already set, like my DVR was already set. And then you told me about it. And I was like, Emma, I'm already set. And then you were like, my cousin. I was like, we need it. And like I said, I watched it last night because I wanted it to be super fresh in my head. So I am so excited to talk about her, talk about this awesome documentary. I assume you watched it. Did you watch it the night it came out?
Yeah, I DVR'd it and watched it a little bit later that night. And then I actually stopped about halfway through. So I just rewatched the whole thing the next day.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. Well, without further ado, let's bring in your cousin, Amanda.
Hi, guys.
Yay.
Hi. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks for coming on. Super excited. You're a celebrity over in the ESPN world.
I like to think so. My mom thinks so.
Oh, yeah, we think so too. Anytime you've worked on anything that has won an Emmy is just like super cool. I was like, whoa, which one won an Emmy? And then I was like, oh, the Kobe Bryant one.
Yeah,
I didn't actually watch that one yet, but I will.
Kobe won an Emmy this year, and the one within that photo is actually the one that we won the previous year for it was called Project 2020. It aired on Christmas Eve, and it was like a 3-hour like look back at the whole year of 2020 and just kind of like how sports adapted and stuff. And it was best edited sports special. So that was my first one.
Can we have the round of applause? Like,
and I'm thinking, I'm like,
sex right now. You are.
I know. Woo! I'm I'm wondering if I think I watched that one or part of that one because of like 2020. I was literally at a workplace lunch watching March Madness when they just shut the games down. It was like,
Oh yeah, like being at work and having everything just like slow down to a screeching halt was absolutely crazy because I was ready to work like 10 days in a row with basketball season and everything, and I had like been booked on all these extra days and just kind of like we're here until we, you know, run out of work to do kind of stuff. And then everything was like, okay, like they're going to make some announcement, like what do we do and stuff, and everything just came to a complete halt. It was crazy.
Well, now I need to go back and watch that. But I feel like I've watched or at least some of it because yeah, it was the whole. And I think that was for me too. Was like what made that shit real when sports stopped.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah. Like come hell or high water, man. Like they will play a football game. Like they will play a basketball game and stuff. And the fact that they, at least the NBA, got everything up and running as fast as they did was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the fact that they stopped March Madness in the middle of a game, and we're like, nah, like that's like that was it. Because it was one thing if they had played a game, like you were gonna stop it for tomorrow, but they were like, time out.
Don't care if you bought tickets, like get out. Like, that was nuts. And then it was the night for me, the night that it like became real was the night of like the Jazz game with like the whole thing. I ended up doing another like E60 about that like sometime later, but the whole like with like the press conference and stuff, and they kind of held everyone in the arena, and it was the same night that like everyone found out that Tom Hanks had it too, and so it was like it suddenly became real. Like I remember I was hanging out with a coworker that night. We're like, oh, like we might not go to work tomorrow. Like this is a thing.
Yeah, I listened to the 30 for 30 podcast on that one. I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was something like the night that something like the it stood still or it just ended. Yeah, you're right, because I wasn't watching that game obviously, but yeah, listening to that podcast, it was like that one was wild. Yeah, absolutely. Emma, when did you guys stop going to work as a teacher? Do you remember?
When did we stop? I want to say it was around March is when it all shut down. I think everything was about March.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, was it the same time when March Madness was like the next day? I don't remember if you guys were still in school or not.
It's all a blur at this point.
Right?
Everything I remember about remote learning is from like yeah, because like it was like I want to say it was the entire fourth quarter of school and then summertime, and then we stayed home for the whole next 3/4 of the next school year, pretty much. So yeah, I it had to have been like February, March.
Yeah, it's just wild. So I don't know if I want to rewatch that one though, because I don't know.
Oh my God! Speaking of COVID, I'm watching like the Grey's Anatomy season of the COVID times. Like I think it's dope how they like put COVID and real life things in there. And it's like we're on the episode now where like George Floyd got killed and all the protests are breaking out. And we towards I just looked at each other. We're like, we gotta relive this shit at our favorite show.
Right? Yeah, that is.
I don't know if I like it or if I just like want the escapism of not having to deal with any of it. Right. At least not relive it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm good on that one. And that, 2020 Kobe also died.
That could kicked it off. It's his fault.
It kicked it off. So, the special that you guys won the Emmy for, that wasn't a 360 or a 30 for 30, was it?
No, that was an E60.
E60. I said 360. My bad. What is the difference between E60 and 30 for 30?
I mean, from like a production standpoint, all the 30.
Yeah. Like what?
They're handled out of house. And 60 is something that like yes, they go out of house for edit sometimes, but like they're more exclusively handled like within like there's its own like department, and a lot of those are more of like kind of freelance projects.
Oh, okay. Just because I was like, I just never thought about that, but then I was like, I never pay attention to which had the and then I was like, wait, because then I listened to the 30 for 30
I just thought
podcast.
I thought it was like, one's 30 minutes and one's 60.
Well, in E60s, like our project was an hour and a half. We did Unrivaled was 2 hours. Like it's usually 60 minutes. Sometimes they do them in like 30 minutes, and then they pair up more than one. So it just kind of varies by project. Most of the time, I think they try to keep them to an hour, but at least in our case, I kind of was like, well, let's just make them an hour and a half and see how it goes.
Absolutely.
So, ask for forgiveness, not permission in this case, and it worked out. So
exactly. And I want to get into this new one, but first I want to learn a little bit more about Amanda and how she got into the big world of ESPN. So let's start. I already know you're her cousin. You didn't grow up in Rockford though, LaGrange. Were you a big athlete growing up? How was sports part of your life growing up?
I did like every kind of like travel sport and stuff growing up. By the time I hit high school, I was like solely focused on dance. So I wasn't really into I wasn't participating in any sports that way. Grew up like, again, Chicago sports fan. My brother played baseball, hockey, like did all of the things. So sports was always like a part of my family's life. And again, like relationship with like my dad, my brother, like it was just like a part of like families going to hockey games, going to baseball games, going to like Blackhawks games. We had season tickets forever. So it was always kind of a part of our lives. And then just as far as my like editing career, so I had gone to college, I studied mass communications, like journalism, and was able to do like a little bit of design work, a little bit of video, a little like teach you enough of anything that you can like survive in an ad agency, and realized like video was really what I wanted to focus on. So I worked for a little while, worked in marketing for a little while, and then I ended up going back to Columbia College in Chicago and got a second bachelor's degree just specifically in editing, so I could just learn a little bit more about like how the industry worked, how to get a job doing what I wanted to do. Which was, it worked out perfectly. I was able to, again, like specifically focus on editing, but then do a little bit of like graphics and like motion graphics, a little bit of animation kind of thing. And then I interned all over Chicago, took a lot of kind of like low pay, like, again, it's really hard to kind of break into this industry. Took a lot of low pay like production jobs. And then actually had a recruiter from ESPN reach out to me in 2019 and was like, oh, well, I'll take the phone call. Like, what can it hurt? I was like, I don't want to move to Connecticut, but like, I'll take the phone call. Like, what can it hurt? And I did the phone call. I was like, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. Like, I guess I'll do the video call. Oh, they want to fly me to Connecticut. Oh, I mean, they're going to fly me there. So like, I guess they're going to, and then, I mean, I was sold immediately. It was exactly what I wanted to be doing. It's a great variation in the kind of work that you get to do, and kind of the length of project, the style, like there's great variety of people. Which is super, super exciting. And so I started there in 2019 and then was exclusively on campus until COVID hit, obviously, and then was remote for a little over 2 years, and then asked if I could move back to Chicago. Connecticut was just kind of hard to be far away from family, and was pretty much working exclusively remote, and was able to move back. So back in the city now, working exclusively remotely, and it's been a great transition.
That's wild. How did a recruiter find you?
I'm
still stuck on this one.
No, I think she just found me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I had a link at the time to like my most updated reel and just kind of work samples and stuff. And
had you done some sports stuff prior?
No, I was working for a company that actually exclusively did pet products. So a lot of like Amazon product pages, their personal website products pages, things like that. And about 95% dogs, about 5% cats. Brought my dogs in for a whole lot of things. Got to stage mom them, which was really fun. So I wasn't really doing anything like sports related. And at least on the edit side, like you really don't have to have knowledge of sports. I mean, they'll teach you how they want you to edit, or you kind of learn, I guess, how to edit a certain play for certain sports, but even that is like subjective. So it's just kind of your eye. It's just kind of like creatively, there's not really a wrong way to do it. At least to go like the producing route, you have to have like sports knowledge. Like I know people who just
right.
built out like Excel sheets of like random information so that when they were doing all these interviews, they could find it. The extent for me was like, do you like sports? And the answer does not have to be yes. So
Okay.
yeah. So again, like worked out. And again, I tell people all the time because they're like, really, you're like, you like you working in sports? And I'm like, it's stories about people is what it really is.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and like these people happen to do like cool things that have really cool like camera angles on them all the time. But yeah, it's mostly just stories about people. So
and that's what I do too. You know what I mean? It's mainly about, right, the sports is the central topic, but everything is a human element and everything can be interesting if it's told the right way.
And I think I've found my voice too, because there's some people like just from my job, just like sitting in the chair as an editor who kind of just take the story that's given to them. And I feel like I've kind of found my voice. People kind of appreciate my opinion, feedback, and kind of that like relationship and like the back and forth building on a project. And and I have like come back on people who, they've given me a script and I'm like, the extent of this story is he's good at baseball. What else do we have? Like, again, like, that's great. Like, we wouldn't be doing this if he wasn't good at baseball, but like, what else is the story in there?
Yeah.
So I'm like proud of myself in a couple cases that we were able to kind of pull out like, okay, what's like the behind this kind of thing. I worked on a lot of the cover stories. Obviously like ESPN used to have the magazine, and now that there's no physical portion of that, they kind of do it digitally. So they do a big like cover shoot with whatever person, is like the cover model, I guess. And then they do a big photo shoot. And then we I kind of helped develop the look of this video portion that goes along with it and is embedded in the story when they publish that online. And so the written portion really has nothing to do with the video portion. Like they don't have to really be telling the same story, but we only get 6 to 7 minutes. So again, like the number of times people have like sent me the script and it just is like, okay, here's all the ways he's good at basketball. Yeah, that's great. But like there's got to be something else in here. What's the through line? Like what, not everyone has the same kind of hardships that they've faced, but there is always like, you can always go deeper. You can always find again, like another through line and another story. You can always dig something up.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing, like not every week, but I do watch a decent amount of College Game Day, and the amount of times College Game Day has made me cry. It's ESPN, but like it's wild the amount of times, because it does that human element and they do it so well.
And even to boil it down for some of those things into 3 minutes, like,
yeah,
you gotta like, here's like, not only the hardship, but like, why do I care about this person?
Yeah.
And there are, there's a 1,000 ways to skin a cat. There's 1,000 ways to kind of present that. And you just kind of got to see like what materials you're given and what you can build out of that. So,
yeah, it's thought of it that way. Like here, like ESPN. Oh yeah, it's sports, but like they're, like you said, it's a story about a person. It's like a whole different like mindset when you put it that way.
People, like I said, people ask me that all the time because obviously, like, pretty girly with the makeup and the hair and whatever, and they're like, "Oh, she does sports," and it's so much bigger than that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I wonder when they first started doing that, within the network. At what point did they realize that, hey, we can do more than just show this basketball game. We can tug on the heartstring a little bit and get people a little bit more personally invested.
It has so much to do with like I say kids, the people that are, like the young people that are coming in who are just like really hungry to do that kind of work. And like, especially now you have kids coming out of college programs that they've done like, it's filmmaking is what it is. Like, it's I'd say it's more specialized journalism, but it's filmmaking. And so you have people who have that kind of training, who know that kind of storytelling, that kind of writing, and they come in and that's what they want to do. Those are the stories they want to tell. And a lot of the time it's not the network saying we want these stories. It's people saying like, no, like it's people fighting for like, this is a story that deserves to be told. And this documentary was such a shining example of that as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this documentary that just came out. First of all, how many documentaries do you normally do per year?
It totally varies. So like
Mhm.
this initially we started in May, and the initial release date was supposed to be July 25th. And
Right.
when we started in May, we started with the trailer. You normally don't do that, but again, just like what the assignment was, I was like, I don't know what the story was, but like, sure, like let's put this together. So we started with the trailer, and then we start with, building this beast out, and we were going like not like nonstop. When I tell you nonstop, like we were working 7 days. Like there was a day I stayed because we were on campus for a little while. It was before I moved. So we were able to we were the only two people in like the whole edit area. And me and my producer that I worked with. And there was a day that I was there for 24 hours when we were just trying to like get this out and like not even get it out to get it on the air, but just to get it to like management to have people look at it, because people didn't know this story. Like I was pretty unfamiliar with it. I remember when I was trying to get, like, when my producer was kind of pitching it to me, like obviously we already had it like assigned, it was coming up, and she was trying to give me the lowdown on everything. And I was like, I kind of remember seeing some of that. And then like, I remember like the protest in the news, but I'm like, it didn't get a lot of coverage. Like it barely made a blip on Sports Center on our network. And so it was crazy, like how big it felt and how like small other people were making it seem. And like the producer that I worked with, who's the director listed on the show, Jennifer Strauss, she was a D1 soccer player. She knows a lot of these women. Like she was at a wedding and like talked to one of them about it, like she like grew up in this environment. She knows these women. She knows a lot of them personally. So this was a really personal story for her. And when the stories of her that she told me about pitching it a year ago, like it kind of got like, people were like, oh yeah, interesting, but it didn't get like the enthusiasm that you would think, which was insane to me. And so we both, I feel like, came in with like a chip on our shoulder of like, no, like this needs to be good. This needs to be great. Like we're like, if like no one's gonna like let us, like we're gonna make them hear the story. It's kind of the, like, we went in guns blazing, the two of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really great. But yeah, we worked nonstop for 7 days a week, I think, until we got like midway into July. And then at that point too, they had gone from telling us we had an hour, and then we basically were just building out an hour and a half regardless. When you build out an hour and a half of TV, it's a lot more than that, and you have to cut it down. We had like 2 hours laid out. And a final hour and a half of TV is like an hour and 12 minutes. I want to say it's like 72 minutes. And so like there was no way we were going to get through this. And at that point too, it was almost a completely different, the story was still there, but it was a completely different show. We didn't have Mana Shim,
which, like, if people haven't watched this documentary yet, again, and it's on the whole scandal of the women's soccer, the coaching abuse scandals, and there were a bunch of coaches that have been caught up in this. This was probably the biggest coach, although the Chicago Red Stars part of it didn't even touch, and that one's kind of blowing up too. But this one kind of had the sexual abuse element to it, which the other ones I don't believe did. One of the main people that was abused is this woman who it seemed like, as the viewer, the whole documentary was based on her story. So like, to think that you had worked on this for months, built everything out, and then she came on.
Yep.
Just toss everything out, lay on fire, and started. Do you just start over? What do you do?
Kind of. I mean, there's a certain amount. You can't just like, and I danced growing up, so I use this like metaphor for people is like, you can't like create an entire, like do an entire dance to like a classical piece of music and then pull that music out and just throw like a country song in. Like you just like the same pieces are not going to fit together the same way. You can take elements of it and rework it to like along those lines and kind of along like a timeline, especially if it's if you've got like plane montages or behind the scenes stuff. If you kind of just built out sequences, like you can kind of grab the chunks, but you can't just like swap things out and replace it. So initially, Meg Linehan, who was the reporter for The Athletic, was the woman with the glasses in the story.
Yeah.
Mana and Sinead had initially told their story to. She was a so much more prominent figure because we didn't have Mana telling the story, so we had Meg retelling the story that was told to her and that she had initially reported. And so, again, the way she explained the story and the way Mana explained the story, you can't just swap out one for the other. So there was, even 3 weeks beforehand, we were like completely redoing certain sections, at least for like the beginning, you could kind of keep the intro. Again, that changed 1,000 different times for kind of how in depth we went to the previous leagues and stuff, because initially that was so much bigger part of it was. It still was at the end, but the way we told the story about the history of the leagues and kind of the fragility of professional soccer as a whole and to what led to all of this, which obviously is such an important part of the story. Again, how much time we devoted to that, how we talked about that, where we like kind of wove in the story was constantly changing. It was constantly in flux, even until like the week beforehand. Because in addition to that, we got an Alex Morgan interview 2 weeks before we were airing. I think it was like September 20 something. My producer flew out to San Diego and had like a half hour with her to film, which again, having, yes, she was a part of, she was, the first person that Mana told about it.
Yeah.
But just having that name and just like adding the legitimacy to it was huge.
Emma, you're a bigger.
She's Alex.
Yeah, I'll say. Emma's a bigger soccer fan than I am. But is that not like the face of soccer right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, literally.
Literally.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to my aunt, her mom, and her mom gives me all the scoops. Like her, when I say she's her biggest fan, like she is her biggest fan. Like, so every time I get the opportunity to like speak to her, she's like, Amanda's doing this. Oh, she's working on this. Oh, and yep, she just flew out to Connecticut because she's doing this. It's gonna air tonight. So like I knew this documentary was coming. So like I think I had lunch with her the week right before you flew out to Connecticut to finish it. So it was like the week before it's supposed to air in July. So I was like, all right, next week I'm ready because this story is like close to my heart. Like I played soccer my entire life. Like this would have been, or this what was happening to these girls is my generation of soccer players. We all came out of college at this time. Like back when it was the previous leagues, WPS, Chicago had open tryouts. I literally had the thought once or twice, like, oh, I wonder if I can do it. Like, should I go try out? And I would have been with that coach that got fired. Like it's just those like random thoughts you had, like damn, that could have been me. Like if I took the chance, who knows? That could have been me. But yeah, so I was ready for this. And then like the day of, I like texted her and I was like, it's at 7, right? And they're like, oh, they pushed it back. Damn it. And she's like, we think it's October, whatever, I'll keep you updated. So then
it was supposed to be the last week of September, and then I don't know, like the first week of September, like they pushed it one more week, and I was like, I can't even keep track at this point. Like, I think that eventually the trailer was like re-released with the date, but they were being super cagey when they like initially first changed the date. I was like, I don't know, I got so much work to do. Like, I can't even like keep up with that at this point. But to your point too about like the Chicago stuff, like Rory Deems was in charge of the Eclipse Club, and like I know that because I went to elementary school and I know that logo from those shorts. Like
I hated playing them. That was the one club I could not beat as a kid. I hated playing them.
Again, when it was explained to me and like the stuff and again that he was like ran that program and he ran like the Red Stars and stuff, I was like, I know what those shorts look like because girls that I went to elementary school like were like a part of that. And so again, like the reach of a story like this and
it's so close to just
crazy
Chicago. Like it's all connected to Chicago, like
seriously.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like there was a coach like that out of Rockford that ran an all girls, the one girls only soccer club in Rockford when I was growing up. He was verbally abusive. The girls hated him. Like it was so bad that my club made it a policy that we were not allowed to play them.
Wow.
And it was a really controversial, me going through like preteen years and teenage years, because the girls would bounce back and forth because, you go where you're offered the playing time, where you're offered the promises. where you think you're going to get offered a college scholarship, but that D1 look, so it's like girls will go back and forth. I never stepped over. I was like, nope, not going there. I heard the rumors. I've seen it. I've seen him. No. But so like, it was always like a rivalry. And then it got to the point where it was like, we're not entering the same tournaments as them. You can't play them. Like, it was that bad. So like, that's the same generation, So like, it was just, it's been a shit show. It has been.
Well, and so many people can look at it. And again, like I might have taken this opinion years ago, before I kind of like worked within this industry, of hearing that and thinking like, oh, just like, women can't take it, which is complete BS. Like listening to Molly Hensley Clancy, who was the reporter who kind of exposed the Washington team with
Richie.
And like and she also, I guess, went back, or she again, like had interviewed a lot of people with a lot of different coaches, because when she was calling people about the Richie Burke story, they're like telling her like, well, why aren't you looking into Rory Dames? And they're telling her all the stuff that he would say. And the fact that like he called, again, how old are these girls that are, they're kids, they're 14, 15 years old. And you're calling a 14 or 15-year-old a fat SCUNT. Like that's abuse. Like
that's
again, like you can call it what you want for like adults and whatever, but like that's not okay. And I've talked to a lot of people since this is aired and stuff, and we weren't able to go into a ton of detail on that. And there are like people who I've spoken to who kind of like had that like, oh, like verbal, like, okay, it's like women just can't take it. I'm like, no, like this is what was said. Like that is just like that. There's no, like, I talked to like my dad about this. I'm like, there's no MLB team like that. Those words would not, there's no equivalent to that to say to a man at batting practice. Like there's just not.
No, I mean, it's like maybe Bobby Knight era of Indiana hoops, but we're not in that anymore. And it's interesting how you say that with it, not necessarily, people now are looking at it like, no, even for adults. So for Emma's league, for her semifinal game, we had the fan pass, we were watching it, and they were showing the two different teams' locker rooms. The Seattle team's locker room was an old white guy cursing a storm at all of these women. How is that gonna, there's no motivation, you know what I mean? There's no strategy. You're calling them every type of word under the sun. It is not, I wouldn't be able to play with that. And then they would go to the Blitz's locker room. Now, mind you, you guys were ahead, but it was still like, you have younger black men as coaches. Everything's calm. Everything's about the plays. You can just see them on the screen. Like they were all business. Like they were uniting the team.
We didn't even get a team talk. It was like, all right, offense, come here. This is what we're doing. And all the defense, like literally the defense, like we were sitting there like and against their lockers and we're like, keep it up, guys. Good job.
Like,
yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because we come from the 80s, the 90s, where this behavior would have been considered, passion. It would have been just considered. But now, like you see that juxtaposition, you see a grown man having a temper tantrum because he doesn't know how to express his emotions. And he is doing nothing to encourage. So you bring that down to youth sports. And it's that same, like, what are you doing? And what are you teaching these kids? Like you're going to get nowhere in life throwing a temper tantrum.
Well, and I think I think like what happened with like USA Gymnastics is heartbreaking, but I think it finally opened the eyes of people who are further removed from like maybe just gymnastics as a sport to like what, like the insane level of abuse of children in like sports. I don't care if you're, you're 16-year-old winning a gold medal, like you're still a child. And I think again, the number of stories who have come out again, beyond just Larry Nassar with like the Carolis and everything with that, with again, like verbal abuse. And
I was thinking the Carolis because ESPN's podcast on the Carolis was a 7-part. It was a whole season. Like the rest of the seasons have been one topic per episode. Some of them might be. They did a whole 7-part series, whole season on the Carolis. That's how deep it was.
I gotta go back and watch that.
No, it's the podcast, Emma. It's the 30 for 30 podcast. It's highly recommend.
Excellent. But again, like you see again, it's abuse. I don't care if you're a professional athlete or not. And like, you can't be treating children that way, regardless of how talented they are. And there are ways. Again, I get like we're all it's like they're like it's Soviet era like teaching style. Like we have evolved since then. Like there are other ways.
One would hope,
right? Which is just again insane. But I think that again the story like that is again specifically with the Carolis and just like the psychological control and abuse of young kids, I think open people's eyes to again that this is happening in youth sports. And again, for men, women, for everything. And when stuff like this is starting in youth and it's accepted for, when you're 13, 14 years old, you don't know how to ask for anything better when you're 22. And that's in any, and again, when people were kind of asking me about what this was about and stuff, and I'm like, and even when we were getting pushback, about this being an hour and a half or whatever, I'm like, this is a story about 51% of the population in the workworkplace. This isn't a story. This isn't like a hyper specific.
So true.
Like this is a story about like the women in the workplace. And it made me like so much reflect on the different jobs that I had, coming out of school, and just the way I view authority figures and the way that I kind of respond to that, and the way that I've bent to that. And I've been scared for a job before if I don't go to crazy lengths for a person. And, never in my life has it been like in like a sexual nature, but I just think of just, people who have treated me really poorly, and I took it because when you're 22, like, what else do you know? Like, this is a person in an authority figure. It's been explained to you to respect them, and that they are your coach, they're your boss, they're your boss's boss. They're in this position of authority, so they must know better. They must be coming from a correct place, and that must be the expectation for me.
Right. And I love that point you made about like, this is just women at work. Because like, we don't often think about that is like with athletes, like it's what they do. But a lot of times I don't feel like we think of it like as like a job, right? Like, and as explained in the documentary, like women soccer players don't make anything like that. There's been a 2-year-long lawsuit on it for a reason. They don't make anything. Like, I know multiple of the Red Stars work for my old soccer club that I used to work for here in the city. Like, they're literally making maybe like $25,000 for the season. Like, it's crazy.
I saw them come off when I was flying to Nashville over the weekend. They were flying to their game. I saw them getting off the red line in front of me, like going up at O'Hare. Like, these women these women were taking the red line.
When I lived in the West Loop, I found Julie Ertz and another teammate walking down Lake Street under the train tracks. Yes. Like, they are just like real normal people, not making nothing. Obviously, a millionaire because of Zach, but still, the fact is there that they are normal people. But anyway, going back to like you said, like workplace, like I like how you guys really emphasize like where's the policy, in there, because like people don't think about that. Like every other job has like a sexual
your HR department. You have it's literally against the law. There's
like where was
to harass people by their gender. That is federal law.
Well, Lisa Barrett is still scratching her head, wondering where, trying to figure that out. Because
my God, why did that woman agree to do an interview?
I know.
I have been saying this for months. Like, at least like we got Sunil Gulati, which was awesome, but like Sunil at least can't, like, if you're gonna agree to come, like, what do you think we're gonna ask you about? Like, it's not, again, we didn't ambush you with anything, she was given a list of questions, like what they were gonna talk about. And so if you're agreeing to come in the first place, why you wouldn't be like prepped legally if you're gonna say anything, you know what I mean? Like, this woman she worked for like the Olympic organization.
She's the former commissioner of the whole league.
Yeah. But like, again, worked for the U.S. Olympic Association, which like isn't a great sign for anybody, but she's been, she has had high profile jobs before. And so it really like kind of blew my mind that like, again, if you're going to agree to it in the first place, that you wouldn't know that this was going to be asked and you wouldn't come in prepared. to answer some of this because she just floundered. Like, again, that's not editing on my part. I wish it was. That is not editing on my part. That is her genuinely trying to answer a question.
I have seen, and Emma probably knows this more than me, I have seen literal toddlers lie better than her. I mean, this woman, the whole thing of like looking up to the side when you're trying to, this was her, the whole freaking time, and the way she like took it and I'm like, lady, you would have been a lot better if you just declined to come on, because right now you make yourself look like a complete lying jackass. Yes. Like, wow. Never have I ever seen something so bad, like, lady.
I know. It was like watching because obviously, like, I wasn't present when they did the interview, but like Lisa Salters like handed her an iPad and was like, "We have the emails," like. And she's like, "Oh, I'm not sure if this is like if that when she answered it, and I can't even remember like what is and isn't in the final piece, but she's like, "Oh, I'm not sure."
She does say that.
Yeah. Emails are like public information. I'm like, Alex Morgan tweeted them. Like, do you know how many followers Alex Morgan has? She tweeted them. Of course, they're public information.
I'm not sure if it's public information. Oh, okay. So even if you had been told about it and it's not public information, it's okay to lie about it.
Like, I love that edit. I love that you were just like, oh, I don't have them. I don't remember any emails. Oh, well, let's read it. It says here's a close-up of it, guys. Ta-da. I was like,
and here's where you say, hey, if we're in town, let's go get a coffee. Let's meet up. Have some
petty as hell. I was like, yep.
Insane. And again, like if you sit and watch the whole, I don't know how long we had her in the chair for like an hour and a half, that whole interview is that bad.
Her like squirming like that.
Squirmy, like, and I always made the joke. It's crude, but I always made the joke with my producer, and it always made her laugh. That there was points where you could literally see her butthole clench, like, trying to answer some questions. And I said this constantly for 6 months. It always got a giggle, but like you could see it happening because, again, like, what did you think we were going to ask you about?
Like, honestly, can you imagine her taking a polygraph? The person reading it would be like, I don't even need to hook you up. Like,
I wish I could have seen like her flop sweat when the thing was over. They cut the camera right before she's like right as she was standing up, and I'm like, I guarantee her back is like dripping.
At least she wore a white shirt, so it might be like. But you can still see the back sweat with the white. Imagine if she had gray on or something.
Oh, just like straight, like yeah,
right.
And like I said, at least like Sunil came in and was like, "I'm not going to comment. Like, do the police thing. I'm not going to comment on an active investigation. Like, how many times have you seen Law and Order? They say that all the time. Like, make it up. I don't know."
Right. Like, yeah. Sunil, him saying that, I'm like, yeah, that's the typical whatever.
But that's the
normal response, and you can say that. I mean, and that's an acceptable response. Is I'm legally not allowed to comment on an ongoing investigation. And you have this lady like, like,
oh, I don't know. Like there was a policy, and then like Megan Burke being like, there's no policy. Maybe in her head, but there's no policy.
And here's the thing too: if with any future lawsuits that come out of it, they can use that footage that you guys have of her.
Oh, you don't even have to do that. The emails exist. Like
that too. That
too. All forwarded to me so that we could put them on screen and stuff. And I have like, emails from 5 years ago from like Mana's Gmail account, just like hanging out. Like they all exist. Why people don't think that there are receipts anymore is just insane to me.
My dog's over here looking at me like, what are you getting so amped up about? I'm like, this lady. And you know, I like how, bringing it back to the beginning of the show. And again, I'm going to reference ESPN 30 for 30 podcast. Cannot recommend it enough because I like to listen to, when I'm doing long runs, I like to listen to more investigative type journalism. And I've listened to like a whole bunch of sports ones. So I did like all of the ESPN 30 for 30s on long runs on the lakefront. But there was the one about I think one of their first ones about women's soccer. And so you guys, you touched on it, the beginning leagues that started, kind of why they folded. The podcast goes into way more into way more detail. Amanda, have you listened to that one by any chance?
I have not listened to that, but I was also going to recommend the ESPN Daily podcast that the director, my producer, was on. That kind of explained a lot of the story. Again, if you've seen it, it doesn't. It complements it well, but she.
I didn't know there was a daily one. But one of the interesting things that stuck out to me when I was listening to that podcast, right? Because they're talking about, these women leagues, they're not making money. They flop after a few years. I don't believe as a whole that Major League Soccer is profitable yet. Individual clubs might be profitable, individual players. However, as an organization, Major League Soccer has been around for how many years? And it is still not running a deficit. Yeah. And they just continue. So to say that women's, soccer, same with WNBA, right? Women, they're not bringing in the money after 2-3 years. Look at how much money you have invested into the men's team, and you continue to invest in the men's team. And because it's private, it's not public, so it doesn't have all this, but it is very easy to Google to find out Major League Soccer as a whole is not a profitable entity. But you have owners that are just obsessed with soccer, and that's all they want, and that's all they care about. So I don't want to hear this bullshit about the women's team losing a little bit money. Now, the first league was horribly mismanaged. It sounds like they, spent a ton of money and fancy real estate for the executives, and they also were trying to do it public, so there were multiple owner, and it wasn't set up correctly as all from a business standpoint. But you can lose me with that not being profitable bullshit.
Yeah. Well, and I think I think so much of that has proved incorrect at this point just because of social media. Because I remember during the March Madness of this past year that 4 of the 5 most highly paid NIL student athletes were women.
Yep.
And it's because I honestly laugh. I went to KU. I'm a KU basketball fan. And so I was following all the players and watching what a guy posts for a chicken shack, post is comically bad. And I think just women have such a better handle on engagement with social media that I feel like it made a difference this past year with the women's basketball tournament. And I think that's why you have so many people turning out in record numbers for these women's matches and these women's games now, because you have all of these women who are, again, that much better at managing their image, managing their social media. And they have all of the young women buying in that way. So again, with the prior leagues, it's what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Should we invest all of it? You need to invest money to make money. That's how it is. But I think now you're able to hold up so many more of these players and hold up their social media followings and say this is the audience. You already have an audience baked in for people, and women are so much better than men are. So I think that's why you're seeing these record numbers at a lot of these games. And what they were again, things I don't even know if they made it into the final piece or not, but San Diego Wave playing the Angel City and having these record crowds and stuff is again just a testament to that. And again, I think with social media, these women are just taking control of their image, they're taking control of their audience, and I think the numbers are actually starting to reflect that.
Oh,
I mean, we'll see what's happening in Europe too. All the women's soccer games, Manchester United, they're sold out. They're completely sold out, and it's the club games. It's not even the international team. It's insanity. And now all I hear on radio now is ads pushing men's soccer. It's all watch
the World Cup, and it's the U.S. isn't even in the World Cup. Well, they are pushing those ads for the World Cup.
They are. They're qualified. The men are actually.
Oh, they are.
And they're going to be qualified for the next 3 years because they get automatic qualification next year because we're hosting it, or next time because we're hosting. And then so because of the way the rules play out, they're automatically qualified for the next 3, so we don't got to worry. But yeah, they're actually My
To that point, though, my dad now my dad couldn't tell you one male soccer player, even like he couldn't tell you. He couldn't say Cristiano Ronaldo as it's like LeBron James for soccer.
Mhm.
I don't know, but like my dad can now name like my dad. I was on the phone with him the other day. He's like, "Oh, you see, Alex Morgan scored a goal, like the winning goal." And I'm like, Warren is into like women's soccer now, like
Really?
games and stuff, and like who's doing well. So, like I said, if you can get my dad to know one person's name on like the national team, like you're doing something right.
Yeah, for all of women's sports, it's really you just need the exposure. You need to introduce people like Emma's League, for example. They had the clips like when fans were out there in Rockford, you had men interviewed like, wow, they're actually really fucking good. These women know how to play football. And you know, during women's March Madness this past year, I was at a work meeting up in Minneapolis. Yeah. And like there was one of the women's games on March Madness going toward the end, and they were talking about going to the next bar. And I was like, no, this. And so the guys started like looking, they're like, oh. And so like a few minutes later, someone else are moving. They're like, no, we are watching this game because it was like, wow, this is actually. And then the next couple of days, people were like, oh, did you see that game, Cher? Did you see that game? Now I don't watch very much WNBA because it's in the summer. And for me, basketball I watch way more women's college hoops because it is at that same time. And I kind of was like, why don't I really watch WNBA? But I realized in the summer, it's like, oh, I can go to the game, but it's really nice. Like, I don't want to go and I sound like my mother. I don't want to be inside on a nice day. You know what I mean? And it's really just, unfortunately, it's just not like the time of year.
It just doesn't feel like basketball season, you know. We're so trained for it being it when it's like winter time and cold, and like I forgot the season started when it did. Like I wanted to go to games, I actually like never did. Like I wanted.
Me neither. It was always like I was either out of town, so, you know, or I had other stuff, or it was go inside or go outside and watch a baseball game. Even though baseball is way less exciting. I chose because it's outside, you know, where we have all these months in Chicago, especially in Chicago. Like if the WNBA played in the winter, I feel like I would go to way, way more games because then I'm like looking for indoor stuff to do. And then you see the price of Bulls tickets and you're like, I don't even like the Bulls. So I'm not paying that.
I did a story about Diamond DeShields, who she plays on plays in Phoenix now, but she was on the Sky before. Yeah. And I did a big story about her because she had this huge, like, life-changing back surgery, like right when COVID started, and she didn't tell anybody about it. And so she was like really struggling. She was a stud that for her like first year, and then she came out, had this surgery, ended up going to try to play in the bubble, and then just like wasn't the same player, but no one knew why. So this was the first time of her like coming out and explaining what had happened, that she had a tumor on her spinal cord, and almost like, she almost like couldn't, she like, if they didn't it was one of those like, if they don't operate, you could be paralyzed, but if you do the operation, you could also be paralyzed. So she had to like relearn how to walk. She had to relearn how to shoot. She had tremors like right when she came out of surgery, and no, she didn't tell anybody this. And so she finally wanted to like come out and tell the story, and we did outside the lines piece on her in the spring.
Oh, I missed that one.
It kind of coincided with like the beginning of the season. And again, she wasn't in Chicago anymore. But after that, again, like most things, my mom became like the biggest Chicago Sky fan. She doesn't even play on the team anymore. But after it aired, she's like a big Chicago Sky fan now, and like loves to go to the game.
You're showing everybody the light. That's all that is.
Yes.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks.
Now, are most of the pieces you've been working on lately women's sports? I mean, you just named 2 for this year. Is that kind of what you're trying to focus on, or is that just coincidental?
I feel like it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of both. So again, what you had asked me earlier about kind of like how long I spend on pieces, I had spent most of the last year. I did a series on ESPN Plus called Clarissa Shields about this, the boxer, and fight with Savannah Marshall. And we did 4 different episodes, and we were kind of like filming them. It was like as it was happening. So it wasn't something that we went out and filmed a whole bunch of stuff and then we came back and edited it down. Like my producer would go out and like follow her to a fight, and like her, like he went and followed her for a boxing match and like kind of some training around it. We created the first episode. We took a couple of weeks off. He went, shot her next fight, her first MMA match. Then we came back, edited that down. And so it was like on and off, but I'd say it was like 9 months for that one. But again, it was like totally on and off. And like this last one was a complete dead sprint. But there are, again, to your question about female like sports stories, there are so few women that work, I feel like our company is like 70-30 male to female, which I feel like is just expected in like the sports world. And I think our department is probably even a little bit more male than that. There's only like 4 women who work in my department, as editors. Again, it's a small department, but still there are just so few women that it's not, I don't really I don't seek those things out, but when I do get them, it's a real like honor to be telling the story. Because again, and a lot of times they're not brought to me by a female producer. So to be able to have like a female perspective on a lot of things is a big deal. So in Clarissa's story too, like she was assaulted as a child from like her father's boyfriend, and she has like again just experienced like the hardest life ever growing up. And I don't know. I think it's just important to have like a women's perspective on a lot of those issues, a lot of things. And again, in this past documentary, not that they didn't want to include, but just certain, you have to be careful with stories like this from a legal perspective, which was the first time I really had to deal with that legally, like what we are allowed to say, what is important to say, what are we saying versus what is implied, what we are hard saying in like a voiceover versus what, somebody expressed in an interview. Like maybe they didn't say it as clearly as it needed to be said. So there were instances where like management would come through and say, like, try to, remove an element of the storyline altogether. And again, having 2 women between me and the producer, like working on it, and we both put our foot down. We're like, absolutely not. This is extremely important. Again, so much. It would be so easy if every case of rape, assault, coercion, misconduct in general was black and white. But like, that's the problem with so many of these stories is they're not black and white. There is no black and white to a human behavior. There are so many shades of gray. And I think it was important to have women telling those stories, because we all like, you all know, like we've all been in that situation where you're just a little bit uncomfortable, but you're not comfortable enough to stand up and say like, I'm walking out of this room for this reason. That's never how life works. And there were a couple instances of people wanting to cut, again, just like certain, insinuating certain things or whatever, if it just wasn't spoken like clearly. And I think that was important for us to make sure that those elements were included.
Absolutely.
Again, as women who work in a male-dominated industry, and again, just being a female in general, being a female of a certain age in general, like we've all experienced certain things, and I think it was really important to include a lot of those elements to the story.
Absolutely. And it was so brave of her too to come out and put it out there and open herself up for, that judgment. But she's uncomfortable. It's her coach, it's her boss. And that whole thing of they are trying to make all these athletes feel like they should be grateful that they have the opportunity. I liked how you guys kind of focus on that word too, is like, oh, we should be grateful that we have the opportunity. Like men on Major League Soccer, they're not grateful for this opportunity,
No, I'm a pro athlete and I deserve to be here.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Like I was a college athlete. I wasn't grateful. I mean, sure, but in the same sense, like I'm earning my keep. Thanks. You know what I mean? You brought me here for a reason, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability.
And it's sad that it's still like that everywhere, though. Like it's like that in the coaching world. Like I coach club competitive soccer when I grew growing up. what gave me my college scholarship, like now I'm on that side, and I actually left my club after 4 years for pay discrimination. So like it's still happening. Like the club that the Red Stars girls went to work at after I left, because I was the last female coach. No, I was the second to last female coach there. When I got hired, there were like 5 or 6 of us. In 3.5 years by the time I left, there's 2 of us left, and I was the one brave enough to walk. I left my teams behind in the middle of the year. So like it's still there. Like again, like I was grateful to be given trust enough to take one travel team. I was a director of 3 programs and a travel coach, and still making less than just a travel coach. Yeah. And then when you fight the contract, they just manipulate you. He didn't do anything but move the numbers around in a different fashion. Still making the same money.
Yeah, and you never hear people tell a man to be grateful, for his job or the opportunity. Again, another podcast I listened to, it wasn't the ESPN one, sorry, but In Her Court, where they were talking about the evolution of women's college basketball from when the NCAA took it, and there was kind of this thing where it first started being coached by all women. And then once the NCAA got involved and people realized there was money involved, now the men, they wanted those jobs. So the men that like couldn't succeed as like D1 men coaches, they would try to go to the women's. And it was like, if a program had a woman coach and she didn't do well, they like, we tried a woman, bring in the guy. But if a guy didn't do well, let's bring their guy. Old boys club and all of it, it runs so deep.
And to that point too, being, if you're someone on the other side of that and you are demanding change, have you ever heard a man be called pushy in the workplace?
No, of course not.
You've never heard a man be called pushy. And like my producer got that in trying to get this story. Like that's what, like, again, she is the only female at her level in her role. So few females in her department overall. And she got pushy for when she was pushing for this story. I've never heard a dude be called that in the workplace ever.
Yeah, I once had to very nicely say someone at my job, someone I get along with very well, respect a lot, when he was talking about some candidates that we were looking to interview, and he used the word for one of them that, what did he say? Nice or sweet. He said she was really sweet. And I was like, you wouldn't use that term to describe a man. And he was like, oh. And it was but he was trying to say it nice because she was a very nice person, right? And to him, she's very sweet. But when I pointed out, you're not going to call a man sweet at work. So we cannot, especially someone that's in a hiring position, you know what I mean? From that hire, we have to can call, I can call my female coworker, my friend, someone that I know well, sweet. Sure. It's fine. But like when we're looking for words to describe people, especially from the higher up, the people that are making the decisions on who gets the job, who gets the pay, who gets assigned to what, we got to eliminate those words.
And again, it has nothing to do with like so many, old white guys just, cast it aside as like cancel culture. But no, like it is simply making old men think about something for more than 5 seconds. And people get offended by that. But no, like that's really what it is. Because before that came out of your mouth, all it takes is like reframing it in your head and to like think this much harder about that. What was it about that woman that was sweet? Oh, she was positive. She was personable. Oh,
she was nice.
She was.
You can say nice. You can say nice.
There's nothing wrong with that. But again, like especially when it's power dynamics too, like you just have to consider. You like you were saying, like if you're going to say it about a female, would you use the same descriptors for a male? You just and it takes 3 seconds to like reframe that in your head, but like God forbid anyone tells you what to do. Like we all hate that. But.
Yeah, I will say I got very positive feedback when I made that comment. And that man who I still have a great working relationship with, he hasn't brought it up again, but it was just very much like, oh, like kind of, I know when I said that.
And again, no, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, and I definitely could tell that he reflected on it, and I hope that he continues to, do that. And because it's, I didn't come at him hostile. I was just like, hey, by the way, probably shouldn't use that to describe a job candidate. If she had a penis, would you say the same thing? And
exactly.
Yeah. No, probably wouldn't.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with like canceling people, or you don't have to, you're not trying, no one's trying to oust you from your job for this, but it's just like something to keep in mind. And I think that just in this day and age, like you just have to be open-minded to communication in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If someone tells me that I offend, if someone were to tell me words I use they didn't like, or like the way it came out, I would be like, oh, thank you for telling. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want you to feel like not safe or included, or like I'm looking down on you.
Right,
Like,
and that's like the normal human response.
Right? Yeah.
Response to something like
I don't want to be a bitch. Like, you call me a bitch, like in a joking way, you know what I mean? Or if I'm angry at you, sure. But like, yeah, I don't want you to think I'm just a raging bitch. Let me have some control over this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Nice.
And again, like I said, I guess stuff like that, like he didn't mean to be sexist. He obviously, like, absolutely, I'm sure, like, was not thinking of it in that way. He was not going to, hire this woman and call her honey when she came to the office. I'm sure he knows better to not do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But it's just like, it's the little stuff like that.
The microaggressions. Yeah.
People aren't aware of.
The little, which you guys talked about in the documentary, blanking on the woman's name, but she was talking. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Talking about those. So what kind of feedback have you been, obviously of me and Emma, raving about it. What kind of feedback have you been getting from this one?
The day after it aired, my producer got an internal email that said that the day that it aired 2 weeks ago, that the women's national team was over in England, I think, playing, and that they had contacted us looking for a copy so that they could watch it. And I think that was like the biggest compliment we could have gotten at that point. Not wanting to see it like while it was on TV, but like this had aired, they saw people talking about it and they all wanted to watch it. It was really cool. Even before it aired, we had sent out kind of like preview screeners, and it had gotten really good feedback, just like kind of in the press and everything like that. It was Jimmy Pitaro is the president of ESPN, and he had referenced it specifically in a big meeting presentation that he was giving last week, which I think was probably like the greatest compliment, that it was, relevant and timely storytelling, but also like very in depth. And again, you came away like really caring about these people. Everyone came away. Again, you can, like, my dad came away from it caring about women's soccer, which I think is like
we need to get Warren's feedback on all of these projects, right? Yeah.
Like I said, he, again, just such a diehard sports guy, and the fact that he, like, again, I was just randomly on the phone with him, and he knows who Alex Morgan is. Like, you've got people buying into it, which is really cool. And again, we've just had so much internal feedback from everyone. Which has been really, really nice. But again, knowing that the national team wanted to watch it was a big deal. Even when when the trailer first came out, over the summer, the feedback we were getting from there. And again, like I said about social media, the previous kind of reach for the last two pieces that they had put out trailers for had like a modest response. But I think, again, you have women have like armies, like for certain, it's like Beyonce, like, like the beehive on Twitter that's going to like come for you if you say something. And I feel like women's sports are kind of, in the same vein, because when it spread like wildfire, right? And when the first trailer initially posted, the amount of people that were reposting the video, commenting on it, like, our like associate producer was tracking all of like the numbers and stuff in real time, and it was just crazy how much it went out. And again, they were really quiet when they changed the air date, and so we had people like from all over that were like emailing us and like reaching out on social and stuff about, like, because they hadn't seen any more information about and then I think the day of was when they reposted it with like a new air date or something on it. It changed again, but that's
That's fine. I mean, hey, my DVR got it. So that is right. That's the most important part for me. I mean, obviously I could have gone back and rewatched it, but my DVR caught it. And that was and one question I meant to ask for you when you were talking about working for a week straight, 24 hours straight, what do you do to take care of yourself and not drive yourself insane or into an early grave with ulcers and heart palpitations and all that?
I should have I've cleaned, this is my desk in my working area, and I've cleaned it up since then, but I had a giant like XL container of those like Alka-Seltzer like Tums tablets essentially.
Mhm.
That was like right here, so I wish I could like bring it up and take it for you in my face. Especially at the beginning, it was me and another woman who's just like a year or so older than me, so we're both like 30 and just kind of in the same boat. And so again, I think right off the bat, we both wanted to just like prove how hard we could go and how fast. And by the last month, when we were just like, okay, we need to survive until this airs, we both made it a point of like, okay, I'm going to take an extended lunch break. I'm going to go for a walk. Like I need to I need to like get out. I need to like have some sunshine. I need to stretch my legs because there's so much of this. It's a little easier now that I'm just like in my apartment. But especially when we were like working on campus, like you're in a windowless room and you can sit there and realize like, oh, I've like, unless you're chugging coffee, which we're normally doing, you can go for 10 hours and realize you haven't like looked up and walked around. So I think the last month, like we made such a conscious effort to like, okay, it's still light outside. Like I'm going to go like stretch my legs. I'm going to go for a walk, and like I have to go for a walk in the middle of the day because I won't want to do it at night. Especially like I started to, because again, for so long, for the first 3 years of this job, I was like, anytime you need me, like whatever, I'm there. I had to pump the brakes on that a little bit.
Yep.
And say like, okay, I'm available. I had to put in things that I'm not going to miss for myself. So whether that was usually like a workout class, like I'm going to that on Sunday at this time, I'm available around it, but like I need this time carved out for myself. Again, just to not be thinking about it, because especially like stories that are that intense are just so all consuming. Like you have to just like get out and like stare at the sunshine sometimes, and just like move around. I think it was important to stay, to just, again, have other things like in your brain, because it's so easy to just work until 3 o'clock in the morning, roll over, walk 5 feet to bed, and then like get back up. But like, I had to like, again, listen to other podcasts, listens to other like, the news is depressing, but like some news, have something else going on so that you can turn your brain off from it, because there would be times that like, me and my producer are having stress dreams and we're texting each other at like 3 o'clock in the morning, like, oh, don't worry, we gotta go back and fix this. Oh, we gotta go back and fix this. Like you have to have something to like pivot your brain to turn it off. Because again, you are pushing yourself like just mentally and physically. To every kind of limit. So like I said, I think the biggest thing was like carving time out and like taking conscious breaks during the day. Cause again, and it also can be really easy for us to say like, okay, we're going to skip our lunch break and we got to work until we get this done. And then we can take a break later. And then suddenly it's later and it's 6:30 and like, we haven't gotten up once.
Right. And you're tired.
Yeah. And we'd like start to snap at each other too. Cause like,
you're not yourself when you're hangry.
Hours. Yeah. It's like, oh, I missed lunch. I've had 8 cups of coffee and no solid food. Like you're going to start like snapping at people. And we had like, I feel like we had like a really contentious week sometime in like August, when it was just like, we were hitting walls with just the amount of redoing stuff. And we kind of had to come together and like reframe it and be like, all right, this is what we got to do. This is how we're going to, again, just like from a mental health perspective, because that's all it was. It had nothing to do with the working relationship, but it was like, all right, here's what I have to do for myself in order to be the best partner I can be. Because it's a 2-person thing at all times. In some cases, like on projects, it's more than that. And sometimes you have like 2 producers, 2 editors, but it was her and me through this whole thing. So it was like, all right, what are we got to do? Like, again, for the both of us mentally to like make it through the end. Cause again, it was a dead, I won't even call it a marathon. It was a dead sprint for 6 months, and it never stopped.
Man, how many hours of footage do you think you had? Do you even want to think about that?
I was trying to think about it the other day, because
you had to watch it all, right? At least once.
Yeah, or not everything, but like for the most part, I know everything that we had. So we had, I want to say there had to have been close to between like 20 and 30 terabytes of footage. alone. Like drives upon drives. Like she had filled like at least 2 8 to 10 terabyte drives. Like there was a lot. And interview wise, I think by the end there wasn't 30, but there could have been like 28 or 29 total interviews. There was people who like didn't even make the final cut into the piece that she interviewed. There was a couple coaches, or like Richie was the only like coach, that we really had.
That actually
that was part of it. There was a couple. I guess the Ben Olsen, who was like appointed president and then like encouraged to step down from the Spirit, we had, and then a couple like interim coaches or like assistant coaches and stuff who ended up like taking over. We had interviewed a couple of those people. I feel like most of the players that we talked to made it into the final cut, but there were
a lot of small snippets of players, which I knew that you probably had like an hour interview of each one of them, and you had to like, here's your 5 seconds.
I mean, like the Tori Huster interview alone was 3 hours long.
Oh,
because so many of them are, and it's a lot longer than what gets boiled down. That was due to like some like sound and technical issues that it was really extended. But if you think about that, and you think about that, there's and usually interview between 30 minutes and like an hour and a half is probably most of them averaged, and you've got 3 to 4 cameras on rolling at all times, and they're rolling at 4K usually. So just the space wise, like just like getting that footage onto a computer into our program took us weeks. And even then, like it was taking so long because there was so much that I had it still like ingesting into our program on a different system when we were like, we have to get going. We have to start somewhere. So that stuff was like still going at all times because there was just so much. And like, I can't complain about that because you always like, too much footage is so much better than not enough footage.
Fair.
But like there was a lot. There were some huge files. So just like media management was insane.
So where do you start?
You
start like the end and build back. Like you do like
this one
like the end goal, and then you figure out how to teach it.
For some godforsaken reason, we started with a trailer.
Oh right, yeah, that's the normal way we do these things.
And again, from like the editing standpoint, I've like glanced at the full script, but like, what are we doing here? So, anyways,
but there is a script of like,
kind
of.
So
producer, does a producer put that together of how they want to like tell the okay?
So like she was present at all the interviews. She conducted most of them. Lisa Salters did like, I want to say like 4. So like 4 like big ones. So she did Mana, she did Lisa Baird, I think she did Cindy Parlow Cone, and maybe I can't remember if she did Kai, she did somebody else. And but for the most part, it's like my producer going and like setting all those up, doing those. So she worked on that for months and months and months, just arranging that. And again, the number of people you have to go through, you can't just like DM like Andy Sullivan on Twitter and be like, okay, like you have to like go through like the team, their communications department, like whatever, and like go through all of these people, and some of them are good at their jobs and some of them are not. But you show up with a crew regardless if they've told anybody that they're being shot that day. And she went through all of that. They submit their like the audio of their interviews to be transcribed. So obviously like, she's present, she knows everything that works, but then we get like a transcription of every single interview. So like, again, you can easily like, again, keywords, if you get like, oh, she was talking about this, like you can find it a little easier. And so she's got all of that transcribed. She's gone out and shot B-roll between my producer and our like associate producer, who is kind of responsible for finding more of like the archival stuff and kind of going through finding that old WPS footage and whatever, and kind of digging through our systems to see what's available. They're pulling that and kind of doing all that simultaneously. And then my producer spends X amount of weeks kind of pulling the script together. Now, people do scripting differently. So there are some times where what I will get is pretty much just a string out of like interview bites.
Okay.
It's just that. And it can be, those are obviously, it's copied and pasted directly from the transcription. So that's a little, like those chunks are obviously full. They have like a time code on them. So it's easy for me to go through and like pull them out. And then again, it totally varies on the producer what the script looks like. So sometimes it's just those chunks. And then in between that, it'll be like a really vague description that's just like, WPS montage here, like something like that. Some people are more specific with like their usually like music we kind of decide on together. Usually the producer will go and they'll have a bunch of stuff pulled. And they'll kind of like give me options. We'll work together on like what, again, we think fits the vibe. Sometimes you lay stuff in, we change our minds 1,000 times. But again, it's some of it is laid in there. Some of it is here's 3 different options laid in there. Sometimes it's just music starts here, I think. It completely varies. And again, what we started with is nowhere near where we ended up. I couldn't even tell you what that's. 12 versions of a Google Doc ago that I couldn't even tell you what we started with. But yeah, it totally varies how much information that they've input. And then it kind of varies how hands-on or hands-off the producer wants to be with me. So it can either be like, okay, I need like build out like the sequence with JP Della Camera kind of walking through the tape library and stuff. She'd kind of point me to where that footage was and say like, okay, like here's some music, like go build something out, whatever, just to kind of like throw it at the wall, see what sticks. And then we'll kind of, again, it varies. Sometimes we, work together, pare it down. Oh, I like that shot. Oh, I really wanted to include this shot. Like sequentially, I don't know if this makes sense. And we'll kind of like work together on those kinds of things. But yeah, it totally depends. I genuinely can't even remember how in detail some stuff was. And then I'm like thinking back to the trailer was such an excellent microcosm of that as well. Cause it started out with like, I think we did a 30-second one before we did the full one. And it started out, okay, here's all the bites we need. Well, that's 3.5 minutes long. We have to make what's important here, whatever. And again, sometimes what you think is going to fill a certain amount. Again, it's so much of it's timing too. So like what you think is going to fill a certain amount of time doesn't fill that certain amount of time. Sometimes, yeah, this person just said a sentence, but they spoke really slow and don't spit it out, and some people talk really, really fast. So what you see on paper doesn't necessarily translate. So again, I feel like that it keeps me in a job because that stuff out never translates directly to how it looks on video.
It just, even just listening to you talk about that, I'm like, that's a career I couldn't do. No, just no. But I love watching the finished product. So just final question or two before I let you go to bed and Emma go to bed and maybe me too. But, we had talked about like, this didn't even touch on some of the stuff on the Red Stars or anything like that. Do you see a part 2 in the future?
I think we covered enough and like there is enough in like the epilogue that just kind of touches on enough of it. It's funny that you say a part 2 because in so much of there was a lot of backlash as we were putting this together to the project. So we kind of had it on both sides. Again, initially, like I said, Mana wasn't a part of it. Sinead wasn't a part of it. And all of our communication with them was through their legal representation before like we got them on camera. And so when people are seeing this, they're seeing a trailer, they're seeing that we got like Sunil and Lisa and all of these people, like they don't trust us to like we're coming at it from like, yes, there were victims here. We're not coming at it of like, let's tell both sides to the story.
Oh yeah, equally. Yeah.
And so many people in seeing that we had interviewed those people, they were, again, rightfully so, like nervous and standoffish about like how we were going to present this. And again, like I completely understand. And we were getting initially when that first trailer came out, thank God, like my information is not out there. My phone number is not out there, but my producer, by having contacted all of these people, like our information's out there. So she's got owners calling her, like people who have too much money and not enough to do during the day, calling her like 10, 15 times trying to get a hold of her, like they don't want to sit down for an interview, but they want like their opinion heard and whatever. And they want to ask her all these questions. And they were like, here, let me forward you all these emails that prove I'm not racist. Like literally crazy stuff from some of these people. And in talking to, it was like a team, like PR team or something, who on behalf of their players, a player saw themselves in the trailer and was suddenly like, oh my God, like, how am I going to look? My producer was talking to the PR person, and that PR person literally said that of, oh, well, you know, I'd be interested if you're going to do like another part of this, like from the other perspective, is how this woman framed it. And she hung up the phone. We looked at each other. What is, like, again, I totally understand your question of like, are you going to follow up? Because there's just so much more that you could keep telling in this story. But from this woman's perspective, it was like, oh, are you going to tell like the other side of it? Like, what other side is it? Like,
this is how we abuse people. Look how good it is.
Well, like, oh, right, we're going to let like all these coaches like come on and like defend themselves. What do you need to defend? Like, these things happen, like, these are facts and events that happened, and this is how it affected these women. I don't care about your reasoning for doing that. Like, the whole point is like how it's affected these people physically, emotionally, and this league as a whole. Like, why do I care? You know, like, I don't care what like the owner of a soccer team has to say about the situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's very much like a standalone. I think it speaks for itself. I think I'd be interested to see kind of, the biggest thing for me was that we were able to see change, and like like we're able to show them like it wasn't just like, here's all these terrible things that happened, like woe is me. Like, the whole point was like there was institutional change, and like there was change made because of all these things that happened. Like,
right,
the team has purpose is what they were saying. And so I think that's like the biggest like win, is being able to see like what changed and what difference they were able to make. And something that another E60 producer said to us, I don't know, in our first couple of weeks of working, was he had stopped by and just saw how things were going. And he was like, you know what, this is actually really cool, because so much of what E60 does is like, it's been 20 years since this. It's been, you know, a look back at this is very much like their bread and butter. And he's like, this is happening in real time. This is
a look back at last year.
Yeah. And
look
again,
back at earlier this year. Yeah.
We were up at, like, we worked the entire night between the report coming out on Monday, like all night long, to update some of the stuff in the story in like the end and the beginning, to address that information had come out. And so, like I said, I think that it stands alone. I think that there's definitely in years to come to see what comes of the changes that have been made. I think is definitely on people's minds at this point. So I wouldn't like completely rule it out, but we're not doing like part 2, the coach's perspective,
or part 2, the Red Star shit. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. And again, they're like you said, like that stuff is like, Emma, you know, with Rory, like how terrible some of this stuff was. And we had to fight to even include it in like the epilogue the way we did. Like they didn't want, you know, they either wanted that we had a bigger section kind of about it before. They wanted to lose it all together. And we really fought for like, no, like, you know, one
doesn't have to be sexual abuse to be important.
Well, yeah, I mean,
like verbal abuse.
He has a lot of like legal charges against him for like something of that nature as well that I won't even get into, but
it would still be more of the same, right? It would be kind of the same. It literally, we could make you could have done that whole piece on that coach with the same type of thing. So that makes sense of why it's like, just do the epilogue. Yes, this is an ongoing issue amongst a lot of coaches.
One is a story.
You just showed one small piece of
one is a story, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is a problem. And you're able to, again, fight the epilogue was a new thing that happened in the last like week and a half of it.
Yeah.
A way to tie in, like there was just so much to cover
Yep.
there that deserved being included for
Yeah.
again just like the number of women who have been affected by these people.
Yeah,
They deserve to have, like, even if it's not their story being told, they deserve to be acknowledged for like what happened to them.
Yeah, you did a great job of that. So, final question for you, Amanda. Are you working on a new piece yet, or do they give you a little bit of time to relax?
I have aggressively taken a significant amount of vacation the last 2 days, like left town for a couple of days, whatever. I've had, thankfully, our scheduling is really good about that. Like they look at the hours you're doing, they're like, yeah, she could use a break. So I'm sure there's something like scheduled on the pipeline, but I'm still in a like, I'm not gonna look until I get to that day kind of a thing.
Amazing.
But I am very, very like deeply embedded with like the E60 group as a whole. I do like long form stuff. I do some small like teases now and again for like Australian Open and things like that. A lot of stuff for basketball just because there's a lot to cover for that.
Yeah.
But the big I've had such good experiences with really long form stuff and like really, again, like detailed like profiles on people that that's just what I hope to keep doing.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to hearing about your next piece. I'm sure if you don't tell me, I know Emma will tell me because your mom will tell Emma.
Yeah. My mom is my biggest PR gal. She really she could make a career out of it. So
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on, talking about how you got to ESPN, and then just talking more about that story. Because like I said, I loved the piece. I've listened to a lot of stuff about it. I've been following it. I still learned a ton. And hopefully that will be one of next year's Emmy Award winners.
Fingers crossed. I think it's got a good shot. So we'll see.
Fantastic. And on that note,
this has been a Chicago Clubhouse Network production.
bye.
Bye.